Hey, drop.
Welcome to AI FISEC today, the pulse of innovation where the digital frontier meets physical security. I'm your host, Don Marone, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this electrifying journey through the world of AI and physical security. We are here today to dive deep into the heart of innovation, exploring cutting-edge ideas and breakthrough technologies that are reshaping the way we protect our physical spaces. So whether you're a tech enthusiast, a security professional, or fascinated by the transformative power of AI, you're in the right place. Get ready to be inspired by our industry experts who are here to share their passion, their projects, and their unique insights into the future of security. Fasten your seatbelts and let's embark on this thrilling adventure together today on AI FISEC today. So today's guests are both joining us from their company called Stratorsoft. First up, we have Adam Groom, who's a co-founder and managing member. Then next, we have Jeffrey Groom, who is the chief technology officer and co-founder. Topic of discussion is data first, AI second. Welcome, guys. How we doing?
Great. Thanks for having us, Don.
So as we usually start, I'd love for you to tell the audience just a bit about both your backgrounds and one fun fact so they can get to know you a little better.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Like Don said, Adam Groom. I am co-founder and CEO of Stratorsoft. Been in the physical security industry for about 18 years. Have a pretty interesting past. Actually started with Ingersoll Rand when they had a security technologies division, more commonly known as Allegion today. Went and worked for SABLE after that. Eventually found myself with S2 Security. We're super fortunate to be able to go through an acquisition. Linnell acquired us in 2018 and gave us an opportunity to start Stratorsoft, which is the company that we operate today. So super excited to talk about data, what we specifically do with data, and most importantly, the impact of data on artificial intelligence. So once again, thanks for having us.
All right. And I'm Jeff. I'm Adam's brother, and I'm our CTO. A little bit about my background. My formal background is in electronics engineering and software. I worked at Motorola for a long time as a cell phone design engineer in the Razor days back then, and then moved into Silicon Valley. Worked on CMOS image sensors, a lot of cool imaging applications there. Then made my way to Detroit and spent some time in the automotive sector doing imaging applications and specifically imaging basically to promote the perception technologies for self-driving capabilities in autonomous vehicles, and then made my way to Stratorsoft, and that's where we are today. One interesting fact about myself is that recently I've sort of embarked on a journey to really understand cognitive science and what is consciousness as it relates to what's going on in AI, and sort of deep dive down the rabbit hole in terms of what's going on in AI beyond just the physical security sort of domain or realm. I am a believer that artificial intelligence, I don't know when, but will at some point wipe out humanity. So I'm in the camp that there's an existential crisis on the way. And it's a really interesting thing to talk about. Maybe we can touch on it. Like I said, it doesn't really relate specifically to this domain, but it's just amazing that the pace at which capabilities are moving compared to what we really understand about what AGI or artificial general intelligence is capable of and how it works. So, yeah, good to be here.
I failed to discuss my one fun fact. So if I could,
let's go.
I'm a huge fan of self-improvement, and to practice that and exercise that, I cold plunge on a daily basis. I'm a big plunger. So a lot of health benefits that come from that. Mental health benefits that come from that. And if you haven't done it, I recommend you try it. 38 degrees at 3 minutes. It's a beautiful thing.
So what you're saying, in Denver, you just walk outside, you just jump into the lake, basically, you know?
That's right. I don't even have to have a chiller. It just stays at a nice temperature in Denver.
Good, because those things are not cheap. I've looked into those myself. I was like, I gotta have one of those to help with inflammation and all the good stuff that it comes with, like elongating life. And so that's cool, man. Good. Well, and I share the same interesting, I guess, fact, Jeff, with myself. I mean, I think there's so much happening in the AI space that's not necessarily in this industry. I think for folks like all of us that have been in the industry, this is where I would say this is a baseline or a means to leverage our network and the people that we know to talk about the topic. And I would say in some cases things that haven't hit us yet in the industry that are hitting on the outside of the industry are still relevant if we tie those back into the industry, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're not adopting it now, we're going to adopt it later, at some point. So totally appreciate that. Well, awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So the topic again is data first, AI second. We can start wherever you want, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, so let me maybe give you a little bit of context on how we specifically work with data as an organization. And it's kind of an interesting story. When we started our company, we really doubled down about February 2022. And our whole idea was to bring high quality software development services to the physical security industry. We didn't necessarily have a focus on data at that point in time. And what we were fortunate to be exposed to, both within physical security and actually got to dabble a little bit in financial services, was building data infrastructure. And the data infrastructure that we were building had a few different purposes. Everything from passing information from one system to another system to create efficiencies through automation, and then also building what we refer to as data pipelines, where you're actually doing preparation of data for analysis. And because we were playing in both the physical security industry and the financial services space, we got to kind of see this disparity across industries where financial services is very advanced when it comes to data, preparing data for analytics, preparing data for artificial intelligence. And then in the physical security space, while I think we're making a lot of advancements, I think that it's like I said, there's a big gap from what other industries are doing related to data. So anyway, we found ourselves doing a lot with data and data preparation. And I think that right now in physical security, a lot of things around data and artificial intelligence is a narrative, and we're really trying to like grasp and get our arms around the technical expertise that's required from data engineers, data scientists to really do the fundamental and foundational work around data to allow us to leverage artificial intelligence. So that just gives you a little bit of background and context around how we touch data. Jeff is very involved from a tactical standpoint on working with data, and so we've really over the last 2 years have been exposed and really dug in to the importance around data and its impact, both whether it's historical analysis of data, but also how important that data is to actually deploy any type of AI or subset of AI.
Good. Yeah, you mentioned a few things there. One was data pipeline prep for data analysis. I think that's like, in some cases, step one. I mean, a lot of customers I've seen, and that's what I'd be curious to get your thoughts of, if a customer started to modernize or to get to AI, assuming that we're still trying to figure out what's the technical expertise around getting data science to achieve AI, they need to have the data first, but it's not just the data probably, right? It's maybe to cleanse, optimize it in some way, categorize it, title it, something in order for it to be usable. What have you seen that's been the case with that? I mean, when you run into a lot of customers that are trying to move the path towards just getting their data right, where do you find that they're at when they start with this?
Yeah, so I think we're in this interesting point in time where a lot of technology has been made available to people, and people are starting with the technology. And we kind of learned this the hard way. We have a data analytics platform that we offer to the marketplace, the physical security marketplace. And we started with technology too. And what we quickly realized is that what's most important is actually putting a data strategy in place. So we were forced to create a data strategy framework that walks people through the process of doing things like, okay, if we're going to apply artificial intelligence or we're going to apply data analytics, first we need to start with a business goal, and we need to understand how that business goal is impacted with the data science or the artificial intelligence implementation plan that we're interested in. And if you don't do that, what happens is a lot of times organizations make an investment in technology and they think that whatever their data science or their artificial intelligence implementation is going to be the technology alone is going to carry that forward. And that doesn't work. There's a lot of things that need to be done relative to having a northern star on what you're trying to accomplish with data and with artificial intelligence. And you have to understand, first of all, if it's a scenario where those questions are actually going to be answered with data because you have the data and the data has been cleansed, or maybe you don't even start the initiative because you don't have the data. You're not measuring today what you need to measure to answer those goals. And I think a lot of organizations have fallen victim to that. And I think outside of our industry as well, right? You've seen like a massive investment in data tools and data technology, and the data strategy and the data foundation is an afterthought. And what's happened is that's led to a lot of unsuccessful data implementations and and will probably lead to unsuccessful artificial intelligence implementations.
I think on that note, I'd love to even take a step back, because I was about to go to the place where I'm like, hey, walk me through all the things to get to the North Star. But I'd love to understand like the importance of data to AI, like as a basis. So we have we have different folks listening in, like from end users, people that are totally novices, to probably some people that are engineers that get it, right? So we want to keep it around a level that everybody could get. But what is the importance? Can you walk the audience through the general importance of data for AI?
Jeff, why don't you take that one? I'm dominating this, and I'll throw my thoughts in after.
Well,
don't let the younger brother push you around. It's okay.
No, it's all right. I mean, I think it really depends on. I think that's kind of a tough question to answer, because it depends on what kind of artificial intelligence, or rather how you're going to apply the artificial intelligence, right? So if you think about sort of the old days, or relatively old days, I mean, it moves so fast, where if you want to apply, AI, sort of the current technology of AI, you can basically think of it like a statistical model that converges or fits on your data, that sort of solves all of the problems that the data describes, right? And we don't really know how they work. They're sort of like a black box. So if you want to build some kind of statistical model that models all of your data, that can solve problems, that gives you answers, like the most obvious motivator is that you have to have the data first. Like any modern application of AI, if you're going to build your own AI thing, like you need data, sort of like a machine learning algorithm, and you need data, and you put those two things together and then you make something useful. So it can get very complex fast, but the idea is that sort of without data, there is no AI in the way that it currently works, the way that AI is implemented. And the other thing is, like, so what's more likely is that right now you're seeing AI in the mainstream in the forms of things like Chat GPT. Everybody can relate to that sort of more than they can maybe thinking about statistical models that fit a data set. And what's interesting there is that data is still important, but it's in a very different way. You don't actually use the data to create the AI, but you might use some commercial off-the-shelf AI to tap into your data and get it move it from one place to another, or do something with it that you wouldn't already that you're not already normally doing, and maybe you can get some insight about that data that you wouldn't have otherwise had. So, I mean, I think either way, your data is important. I think the in terms of skills of communication, people often say that it's the ability to draw. Good communication is the ability to articulate analogies, and one analogy that's commonly used is that like data is now like oil. It's like the new oil. It's sort of trapped in places and it's crude, but when it's refined, you can drive value out of that data. So I think in both senses, you can drive value either by creating AI from the data or insight from the data by applying different things. So I mean, I think the answer is both. Data is interesting both from AI and just from trying to understand how your data can incrementally add value to your operation or to your business.
I do want to take this because I'm holding on to the North Star question because I think that might be maybe halfway point or something. But what do you think about synthetic data versus using actual data? Has that come up in discussion? Has that been something that y'all have explored before? Or just kind of now starting to look into it as an alternative to real data? Or are you combining it with the real data, only using it, synthetic data in some cases, to train models, or at least provide a basis of synthetic data? Has that come up at all? Maybe, and Jeff, this could be not necessarily for Stratorsoft. It could just be in the fun exploration, the thoughts of generally between actual data and or synthetic data, or actual being like, let's say, customer provided data and synthetic data that's not their own.
Well, I mean, we don't have a lot of we don't do a lot with this right now, but I can sort of answer the question in terms of what I think about it currently. I mean, I think that one of the problems is that we're going to, people think there's going to be a limit in terms of raw data. Think about it, like don't think about it in terms of physical security, but think about it in terms of things that are more relatable, like ChatGPT. They basically went out and they got the whole internet. So what do you do? They trained on all the internet data. Like, what do you do after you've basically scraped the whole internet? Like you've ostensibly run out of data, but that's not really true. Like, there's other ways to get data. They're going to do that. But my point is, I think synthetic data is absolutely going to be useful. I mean, so when you run out of data, and think about what the human brain does too. I mean, when you run out of data, you start to imagine things. So you synthesize data in your own mind in order to sort of try to solve a problem, right? So I think that certainly synthesized data, if done correctly, has merit in promoting value in AI, without a doubt.
Yeah, because one of the things you've probably seen the NVIDIA conference highlights where they're basically building robots, and they built, I don't know if you guys seen this, but they built the Omniverse. So it's a digital twin to allow robots to learn in a digital environment without having to bang against actual walls. They're banging against like virtual walls as they get better. And so, I start to wonder because over the years, let's go back to the industry, right? Cameras, they've started off learning through ML. They've graduated to deep learning, which is whatever self-supervised models. But they're still using, either actual data to train on, or maybe synthetic that they bought. Maybe that's not their own. We don't know who owns the algorithm. But the point is that it makes me wonder, like with things like that NVIDIA just launched, if new security technology is going to train itself on a digital twin environment in order to progress and get better, or is it going to continue to train on a real environment? I'd imagine that would reduce any privacy concerns also. I would imagine it would increase the performance of the physical security tech. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think that it's synthetic data is absolutely going to need to be used in the use case that you just described. Something that's very interesting that we're all familiar with in physical security is you have a lot of isolated data or dark data that's very hard to get. And then once you get your hands on it, let's just use an access control system as an example. Once you get your hands on it, you quickly learn that it's not really good. So there's this whole like step of, okay, regardless if you want to use the production environment to train a model, or you want to create synthetic data or a digital twin to train the model, like you got to make sure that you're training the model on data that you want to be training it on. And I think that that's like a major gap within the physical security space right now. And we do experience that a lot. Like we actually get into production data sets, and it's very clear how there's been no process that's taken place to transform that data or normalize that data or any data modeling that's happened on that data set. And at that point, it's kind of irrelevant, right? So I think in my mind that if you create a digital twin or synthetic data couple of things are going to happen. I think that you might have a little bit of bias because you're trying to create the environment to your liking and what you think it should be, which you wouldn't get if you turned it off of good, um, clean production data. But I think it's going to happen.
You said there isolated data or dark data. Is that like metadata, like that lives behind the scenes, or is that something different? I haven't heard
Yeah,
those terms.
I don't know how widely used dark data is, but
Yeah.
in this context, it's data that's very hard to get. You know, and we know that a lot of physical security systems are producing valuable data, but there's a whole challenge of actually getting access to that data, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. Whether it's legacy-based systems that
super
don't provide
interesting.
freely available
Yeah.
APIs.
I definitely want to talk about this because that's a good topic, because I didn't even know that existed. I thought there was only data that you could see. I didn't realize it was data that you couldn't. So could we just talk about that for a period of time? Because now I want to learn.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, you know, like I was saying, I think that the more modern technologies within the physical security space are making data more freely available, and so you don't, you know, fall into the scenario where there's dark data. But there's a lot of systems where you don't have access, or you have to get very creative around how you access the data, right? And the data, there might be a lot of data within a system that's not being produced through an activity log or through a log or something like that you might want to be able to pull out and get insights from. So one of the biggest challenges that we see in the physical security space is accessibility of the data.
Because it seems more expansive than just connecting APIs. I feel like there's some digging here. Does that mean that you have to like go into a customer's environment and just kind of like, how do you uncover that data? Because I would imagine that, to your point, it's like I could see activity logs through an API call, right? If it's events or something. But then the other stuff that I can't see that's not available through the API, is that are you seeing more of that availability, or that ability to get the dark data on an on-prem system than a cloud environment? Is a cloud environment more hidden?
I don't know if it's necessarily that it's on-prem versus cloud, but more so if the manufacturer makes the data accessible. And we've had specific scenarios, like, for example, with video management systems that just haven't, and they're even more modern-based cloud video management systems where they didn't fully develop their API to pull out video analytics that were interesting and useful to the customer, right? So for example, you know, this video management system had your what I'll call, I guess, general video analytics like object count and line crossing, and they also had a loitering feature. However, the API wasn't developed to extract the loitering data. And the loitering data was interesting because that gives you space utilization, right? Instead of how many people cross this line, how many people are actually in this space, and what's the duration of time that they sat there, or you know, were in that area. And so we've had to actually work with the manufacturer to come up with some creative ways to extract that data. In this case, we used what's called a WebSocket, kind of technical, but regardless, there's different ways to get the data out. But that's just a prime example of how you have to have you know, at least a certain level of technical expertise to be able to get that data, and that data is not just freely and publicly available and easily accessed by the business user. And I think that there's a lot of scenarios in physical security that are like that. And it's kind of this, you know, this interesting point in time where people are understanding that data is being produced. They want that data, but how do you get that data? And if it's so challenging to get that data, then that's a barrier to entry for data projects, or possibly an artificial intelligence project right there.
Right. Like some sort of agent that can go find the data. And I mean, that would be interesting. Yeah. Are you seeing this as something you guys with your customers at Stratorsoft that you're working with? I think is a problem that you're looking to solve kind of out the gate, is to find the hidden dark data to help make things more explainable, or is that more infrequent in your business?
So I think that what we always challenge customers to start with, and this kind of goes back to the Northern Star, is what's the problem that they're trying to solve. So we might not even get into the data accessibility discussion until the customer can clearly articulate what they're trying to solve with their data set. And then the next question is, okay, where is the data being produced and how do we get it? If we get to that step, which the first step's actually the hardest step, because you ask someone, what's your business goal? What's your data use case? What are you trying to accomplish? Very hard for people within physical security to define that. And I think that we're trying to help people understand what the data use cases are and how they can leverage their data. But again, sometimes we get beyond that, and then we get into a really fun area where we can use our expertise to access that data that they maybe didn't even think that they could get.
Interesting.
I don't think the dark data discussion is even relevant given the maturity of the industry. I think the interesting thing is, so I agree with Adam, but if let's assume that somebody can articulate actually why they even want their data, which is very challenging for this industry. Like, people typically don't know, first of all, how they're going to use their data. Why do they even want it? But if you can get past that, like Adam said, the next thing is just how do you get the data? And I go back to the oil or like gold analogy. Like, okay, so now people know that there's something there that has value, but they don't know how to get it. They don't know how to drill for it, or they don't know how to mine for the crude material that's valuable, right? And so even if it's not dark data, like, we're at this stage in the industry where it can be difficult. And some of that is motivated by the fact that a lot of these systems weren't designed with the idea that this data would ever need to be moved out of the transactional or operational data store into some other store where people are going to look at it and do things. Like, maybe a more modern system that's developed today, they already have that in mind. Like, somebody's going to want to get this data out at some point. So we're going to build in all these avenues where you can pipe this data out via like API interface. Like, so a lot of times it's just people don't even know like how to start trying to get the data out from wherever it exists.
When you're piping the data out through an API, are you seeing that go through like a SIM usually, or is that going into some other depository to answer a question? Like you said, you're trying to solve a problem. Like, where does it go? Or is it just connect to different systems? Like, where do you see the connections going?
Go ahead, Adam.
I think there's a lot of different answers to that question. It kind of depends on what the technical requirements are for the customer, for the solution.
Yeah.
If the organization
typically is the question. Yeah, typically.
Yeah. So like, if the organization is a little bit more mature when it comes to where they're at with data, then usually they have data warehouse or data lake strategy, and they do want to centralize that data, right? I mean, you probably heard the whole idea of democratization of data, where you're putting all the data in one place. You're making a large data set, and you're making it available to a lot of people. And we do see that, and oftentimes I think that we promote that. But there are other situations, and this is more along the lines of creating efficiency through automation, where you're actually just taking data from one system and then propagating it in another system, to just moving it, right? There's no like central repository for where the data sits. Usually when you're preparing it for data analytics, or it needs to be for some type of AI use case, then you will have a store strategy and have some type of central storage or central database or warehouse or data lake or whatever that might be.
You mentioned one of my favorite words is automation. So are you seeing that that's a lot of work that you guys are getting involved with as well? And can you walk me through what you're doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely one of the biggest things that we're focusing on right now. Is super interesting how many manual processes still take place, whether it's around reporting or whether it's around provisioning of users across different systems, where there is no automation in place. And I think this has been going on for a long time within the industry, but it's still there's still a massive opportunity out there to do things like take a database of record that might be in a human resource system like Workday or Okta or something along those lines, and an organization wants to have all their user demographic information, access levels, user roles, propagate down automatically into these systems, and we do a lot of that automation work. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I think the state of the industry is that that's the lion's share of the work right now, because there's much less friction in terms of understanding why I would want to integrate two disparate systems to automate some things, because like I can understand this very easily right now. Like I have something here that I want over here, and right now I'm manually moving it over because it does some kind of chain of processes or something, and people really get that. Like the harder part is, like Adam said, to try to articulate a business goal around just raw data, like that you don't really know why you want to get it out. So I'd say today, like this integration of in terms of moving data, integrating disparate systems is there's much more demand for that in the current state of the industry than there is for even like business intelligence, or trying to draw insight from your data, or trying to use your data to do something really, really fancy, like a machine learning or an AI model. So, I mean, that's what I would say.
When I think out into the future, I think that, and we're working on this, we're dabbling in this a little bit. I think that a lot of the process and the subject matter experts that are required to actually get insights from your data is going to change based off of things like conversational AI, where if people can really work hard at creating a foundation around the quality of their data, then they're going to start to interact with their data and with their physical security systems through a conversational method, right? And you can see, like Jeff mentioned, his prior point, the general public is embracing ChatGPT because it's relatable and they can understand it. Like it makes sense to them to have a conversation with this application. And if you think about that, if you embed that type of experience into interacting with an access control system, whether you're asking it for information or whether you're configuring it, it makes a lot of sense, and it's very relatable and it's very efficient. And I think that a lot of the work that we're doing right now on the data analytics side or the business intelligence side, we're going to skip right over that, because you're not going to need necessarily these engineers to create data pipelines and data visualizations and apply machine learning models to your data to get insights, when you can just type a question into a dialog box and get the answer back in a few seconds. So we think that that's kind of what the future looks like relative to interaction with physical security systems, and asking it questions about the data that sits behind it.
I literally wrote down to ask you later, what's the future of data? And you were like, this is what we're excited about. And I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, you got me there. Yeah, because I mean, for you guys, especially having just industry experience, a lot of technical experience, getting your future sights on what's happening, Jeff, the stuff you're looking at outside the industry, and like, where do you see everything going with regards to handling data out as the gold, as we say, right? So take me through the North Star bit, right? So we talked a bit about that earlier. So a lot of things that need to be done before getting to the North Star. Obviously, let's assume we've gotten to the business problem. We understand that. And you mentioned some things kind of early, but I'd love to understand like the sausage making aspect of this. Like, what are the details in getting to the North Star after the problem's been identified that you've seen when you've taken customers through this journey? Because one of the things I thought that's really cool about Stratorsoft that I'm hearing is that customers have the gold, they just haven't mined it yet. It's like underneath their house, and they just haven't started picking yet. And you guys are the 49ers, And I find that's an awesome thing, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like, hey, don't go buy another thing yet. Let's see what you got today, what we can leverage with. But you need that expertise to get to that point. But I'd love to understand that journey to that North Star, as you say. Again, some of the details around that, without giving out anything that you wouldn't want to give out in public, would be just a really good way to segue next.
Yeah, no, and I'm gonna read some stuff here, but like I said, we've developed a data strategy framework, and that framework has actually 11 steps in it, and we've written some pieces where you can find this knowledge. It's publicly available, and so I'll just briefly go over what these are and make it pretty objective. So if anybody's interested in this, is kind of the path that we like to take prospective customers down before they even start a data project, right? And so, like we mentioned, the first one is pinpointing a business goal. That's kind of your Northern Star. And if you don't have a business goal, or you don't have a project that's gonna positively impact a larger business goal, then sometimes it's not even worth going down. The second one is you need to start generating questions or identifying specific questions that the data use case must answer. Okay, and you need to, once you have those questions, then again, those questions kind of tie back to the goal. The next is you have to set success criteria that's rooted in the business metrics. The fourth step is it's very important to know who your data customers are and what they value, what insights they value, right? So, and what I think the physical security industry needs to do is they need to understand how they can be data producers for other business units within the organization by asking them what value do they see in the data that's produced by the physical security technology infrastructure. The next one is the fifth one is you have to identify functional and technical and personal risks within the organization. So do you have the right skill sets internally to actually be able to do this, or do you need to outsource those? But more importantly, what are the skill sets that are required to effectively execute the data strategy or the data science experiment? The next is, and we talked a lot about this today, but knowing the data sources. So are the data sources even available? Can you get the data? Are you measuring the data that you need to measure today? You have to identify that and understand that. The next is identifying the tech stack. So there's always some element of technology that needs to be applied to the process, but the technology is really looked at as an enabler or an enablement tool. And this is where a lot of people start. And what's interesting in our data framework, this is the seventh step, right?
Yeah.
But again, you want to put the tech stack in place that supports what you're trying to accomplish with the data. And there's a lot of different tech stacks that can be put in place. You know, there might be existing data tech that's available within your organization that can be leveraged, or you might be starting from scratch. But that once you know what you're trying to do, then you can identify the tech that's going to enable you. The next one is detailing how data will be stored and transformed. So we talked about that. And this is a part of the process that's oftentimes overlooked. Like, okay, we've identified where the data is being generated and where it's coming from, but what do you actually have to do to that data to make it reliable? And there's a whole transformation process that oftentimes requires a data engineer to go through and do things like remove duplicates, remove nulls, actually do an exercise around modeling the data to make sure that you have proper associations and you're building tables correctly. The next one is architect each visualization and dashboard with a storyteller mentality. So if this data is going to be produced into insights or dashboards, which I think this is going to go away once the conversational technology creeps in, but right now the dashboards are still there. We have to architect those. We have to make sure that they're telling a story. We have to make sure they're telling a story related to the Northern Star or the goal. And we have to make sure they're telling a story that people can understand very, very quickly. Okay. The next one is defining a method to scale it. So how are we actually going to deliver this data out to people? How are we going to deliver it out in real time? How are people going to access it? Are you going to try to put it in a PowerPoint that's going to be delivered out once a month, or are you going to actually make it real time and interactive to a handful of different data consumers based on what they're interested or what they've told you they're interested in? And the last one, which isn't necessarily the least importance by any means, but data governance. So how do you ensure that your policies, you're making sure that you're protecting privacy, put a whole data governance strategy in place. After you go through those 11 steps and you've really been able to clearly identify the answers to the questions or identify the specific details to those steps, then you should embark on a data a data science project or an artificial intelligence project, because you have that foundational work put in place. And it's one of those things where once you go through that and once you do that once, then you can build upon that. So I hope that's a little bit more objective related to our process and our framework that tries to make sure that we always keep that Northern Star or that business goal in mind as we go through a project that is heavily influenced by data.
Do you have that, Adam, listed? You said you have an article about that, right?
Yep.
So we'll make sure we include that in the and at least in the YouTube links for people to visit, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We'll We'll provide a link to a position paper we wrote. You can also find it on our LinkedIn profiles under the featured section. We have it in a few places, but we'll definitely include that.
So tell me, out of the 11, right? I'd love for you guys, because we've talked about, for about 40 minutes now. We talked about a lot of different things. Out of those 11 steps, I'd love to see if there's some we can focus on based on maybe we haven't covered it enough, and drill down deep into those points, probably for the duration of the rest of the time. So out of the 11, where do you think that we should talk? What should we talk about next? Because I had a few that were interesting to me, but I want you guys to have that opportunity at least to say, yeah, you know what, we need to definitely hammer these 3-4 points home. But out of the 11 steps, what should we talk about next?
I mean, I think in my opinion, what's the most important is identifying data use cases. And
Okay.
we get asked this question a lot. It's like, what are the data use cases that you see? And it's a very, very hard question to answer because there's not a lot of standardized data use cases within our space. And I think what's happened is for so long, and Jeff said this earlier, I think that so many people didn't realize the importance of the data that was being produced by the physical security technology infrastructure. And when we went through the pandemic, the data started to become a lot more interesting because of how people were using real estate or not using real estate, or how they were using real estate in a different way. So all of a sudden, the physical security data sets became interesting because they could contribute value to painting a picture around space utilization and occupancy. And then I think that it kind of like transitioned into, can these building systems or these physical security systems help out with things like ESG? And these data use cases started to bubble up a little bit. But I think we're right there, and people are trying to define like what are the most important data use cases to us, and how can we be a data producer to our organization and go from actually a business unit that has a lot of valuable information that can contribute to the overall operations of the organization. So I think data use cases is like very important.
To add on to that, I think these 11 steps are far too deep in scope to be interesting to me about conversations that need to be had in the industry right now. And what I mean by that is that they're more fundamental. It's like cultural. So, for example, who actually owns the data? Who is the owner of the physical security data? And what organization, what business unit does it belong to? And sort of what's the culture of that unit? Are they going to be data driven in general? Is the company data driven in general? What does it mean to be data driven? And if we decide we are data driven, then what is data science? What is data engineering? What's the difference between data science and data engineering? And sort of how do we motivate all of these things to actually do something useful with our data? I think that the maturity level of the industry is so far behind these 11 steps that, use cases are like, even I think one level down. First of all, it's like a lot of people don't even know who owns the data. Like, and you talk about concepts like data producers and data consumers. Like, what does that mean? And we could go on and talk about that. And I think that the fortunate thing is that there's often a misalignment between data producers and data consumers, which is a big problem in like mature industries. And so that's one area where like this industry is fortunate because they're so far behind the curve that they can sort of do it right from the beginning in terms of culturally, what is a data producer, what is a data consumer, and how do we put all of the right pieces of the puzzle together so that we have an ecosystem where we have data production, data consumption that drives value out of that data, like in a very efficient way. I mean, those are like the kind of conversations that I think people should be having in the industry right now, which is like way behind this doesn't even have anything to do with artificial intelligence or anything. This is like way behind what the rest of what the rest of the world is doing. But I think it's
data's first though, so yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, data first. Right on.
Loving this title. So so we most certainly could have a physical security end user that's listening, right? So they may say, hey, this sounds really interesting, but I don't know where to go. I don't know who to talk to. But to your point, like, who have you seen that typically owns the data? the data steward, the data owner, like who is the keeper of the gold or the blocker of the gate in front of the gold? Like who have you seen, right? So if I had an end user that was saying, "Hey, this sounds cool, but I need to know who to go talk to because I need to take action as a next step," but they don't know who to go to. Who have you seen that usually owns this? I mean, it's probably somebody in IT, I would imagine, but is there a specific role, no usual contact, and how do we get physical security people that have the access control system bridge that bridge that gap of interest? To walk me through that a bit.
Well, I think that's the $1 million question. I think that the data hasn't been claimed, honestly. So I think it's an opportunity for the physical security business unit to say that this is our data. And then once they say, yes, we're the owner of the data, then they start to dictate the direction of where that data goes and how they can create additional value. And yes, like they can claim ownership of that and then go ask the other business units what they're what goals they're trying to accomplish based on data, and then they can say, oh well, actually we own that data set and we can deliver that to you. So I don't think it's a matter of like going to IT and asking them, hey, like, do you know who owns this data? They need to claim ownership of that data, and they own those systems, right? Like they own the access control system, they own all that. And look, like they definitely own that data, and it's an opportunity. So I think the first thing is to just stake their claim to that, and then figure out how it can be useful. As far as like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I would agree, and I think that's the main reason that we're not seeing more data products being developed to drive value out of data in the industry, because the misalignment is nobody really, like, for different other, or for other business units or what have you, like it might be much more obvious what kind of data is going to drive value for the company. Like they're going to grab onto that data, but I don't think people are seeing the vision of how to use something like access control data to drive value. I think that's really why we're not seeing more like so much inertia to overcome and not more velocity in this direction. Honestly,
Yeah,
I agree totally.
Claiming the stake of data ownership.
Yeah,
heard that here first, right? Take charge, and I think that's a good point, right? I mean, ultimately, listen, like you guys are entrepreneurs, and I've worked at companies, and I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like the people that get stuff done are the people that are starters, the people that care, the people that want to make a difference and an impact in an organization, right? And I think that the exploration of the data is an awesome place to start to say, what are we sitting on and how can we make things better in our current state based on the problems that we have, right? As opposed to looking outward on trying to solve those problems in different ways, we have an opportunity to look inward, but really stake that claim. And I find that and I've worked even just selling this physical security stuff for years to customers. They're not always on board to just change, even if the next thing is better, because maybe they have a million things going on, or there's some distractions, or whatever it is at the end of the day. But I do feel like in any role, I think it's incumbent upon people to just own it and make the best out of it that they can. But it starts with, like you said, I mean, someone's got to take the claim. Otherwise, it's hard to get some progress, it seems. So what else? So tell me, I know we talked about, Jeff, you mentioned that the framework, there's a place of starting with people need to claim it, which sounds like that could be certainly a challenge. But, assuming that they have already claimed it, is there something outside of, or something, excuse me, in the framework that we should talk about next? I know there was some talk about data governance, defining the method at scale, architected visualization, which is interesting. So I'll just take you there if it's okay. Are you guys you said you're visualizing data today? Are you doing that right now?
Yeah. So
okay.
A little shameless plug for our product. We actually have a data analytics product, and it's we call it Stratorsoft Analytics, but it's a full data stack that's offered to the customer as a SaaS application. So when I say it's a full data tech stack, you can do everything from ingestion of data. You can store the data in a data warehouse that's part of the SaaS application, and then it has its own BI layer, visualization layer, where you can actually make the visualization. So within this tech stack, you can take your data through the entire data analytics lifecycle. Right? So it's we think it's very interesting because oftentimes physical security business units don't have the data literacy and data engineering resources to actually take data through the whole analytics lifecycle, or even get their data to a place where they can leverage it for things like artificial intelligence, right? And so, I mean, your question was, are we doing the visualization layer? And a long-winded answer, yeah, we actually touch every single step of the data analytics, applying both the process that we talked about in the framework and our technology, like I've said many times, as an enabler to try to leverage data.
What is a data? Oh no, go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
Well, I'd say, so the more fundamental, I mean, that's a great plug for the product, and absolutely would love if people check it out. I think the more fundamental answer is, like, again, going back to understanding the data lifecycle. And often what people sort of are drawn to or gravitate towards first is, like what you said, something like, okay, are you visualizing data? Which to me is falls in the part of the life cycle that we often call serving the data or service of the data. But before you can serve the data, you have to do all of the data engineering, right? Which is where it starts to get murky. Again, it goes, the common theme is, how do I get the data? Like, it'd be great if I could visualize it or do some cool BI business intelligence with it, or whatever the hell I want to do with it that's interesting, that probably falls under what you would call data science. But before I can even do that, I have to have some, like, a fairly reliable, robust way to get the data from its raw state and extract it and do whatever I need to do with it. And that falls under data engineering, right? So that's why we use terms like pipelines, because the data engineers are really, like, moving the data. There's infrastructure involved. There's, like, conduit, there's connectors, like, get the data to a certain point. And I think that's where people, like, start to fall off the rails really quickly. So to me, the fundamental thing is, like, if you don't really know where to go, you need to start thinking, okay, all these other things are very important. Like we talked about, what's the business case? Why do I want to get the data? And then what am I going to do with the data in the end is great to understand too. But then after that, it's like, immediately I need to understand, how am I going to get this data to where it needs to be? So a big focus on data engineering, I think, which is sort of the part that's maybe difficult, at least it seems like is difficult to sort of comprehend for people that it isn't their area of expertise or their specialty. So that would be my fundamental answer, sort of
that translates into data reliability. Yeah. Like that, the engineering process is what the data engineering process is what makes the data reliable. Right. And I think so many people try to dabble with their data and quickly understand it's not reliable because the data engineering.
What would make oh no, I was just about to ask, what makes data not reliable? Because I think you were just about to answer that more.
Yeah, I think what makes it not reliable is not putting it through the data engineering process.
It's so interesting that we talk about this when the topic being data first, AI second, that I think to the point of all the hype that's happening with AI, people forget, right? I mean, obviously, I think the hype comes with products that are made, not necessarily like taking, business data and making it actionable with AI. And there's such a precursor of data know-how that doesn't exist a lot in the industry. I would agree with this. I mean, that's in general, that might be something that a lot of customers may have not explored as much. And even if they had, because big data was a huge term like years ago, right? And still a thing. But even then, like, try to make the data actionable might have been harder many years ago comparison today, when you layer on an LLM and then poof, it's magic maybe, or maybe it's not, right? And so I think that digging deep into the AI is good, but I think the point of, again, today is more of digging deep into the data side, which is the precursor, the required piece to talk about and dig into before we even get to the next step. So have you, when you've spoken to customers about having to leverage AI at all, or trying to build something with the data, I'd imagine you probably have to pause and say, hey, wait, before we get there, we need to talk about the data engineering aspect. We have to talk about who's owning this. we had to talk about the life cycle. There's so many points, even in the framework, we have to start at in step 1 before we go down to step 12, which is the new one of maybe conversational AI or whatever the next step would be. So I did want to ask, you were hitting on it a bit earlier, and I think this would be kind of cool just to get y'all's perspective. Definitely both of you, is as you look at data as a foundational part of AI, what do you see? And if you mentioned this earlier, you're welcome to repeat it if you want, if it's not different. But what do you see as the future of data and its relationship with AI in comparison to what it is today? Do you see that that's going to change over the next 3 to 5 years? Do you see that it's going to be the same? What continued hurdles do we need to get through to make things more cohesive and things to work in harmony? Like, what's the future of data and its relationship with AI, do you think?
I'll let Jeff take that one first.
Yeah, I don't think that on the current trajectory that it's going to change in 3 to 5 years. I think, again, if I talk about just the world in general, I mean, right now you can't really decouple data from AI. There is no AI without a shit ton of data. Like, that's actually what you need right now. That's what actually made the modern day AI possible, was that we had GPUs became really cheap, which could do the kind of compute that AI needed. And then there was a glut of data that was made available over time. And that's why we have AI. I don't think that that's going anywhere unless the sort of methodology of AI fundamentally changes. I don't really imagine a vision where there's a lot of AI application in physical security. What I think is happening is that general AI, AGI, general intelligence, is moving so fast that it used to be like you would define an AI problem to do a very specific task, like to play Go or to fold proteins or to play chess, right? But now, like, we're seeing that there's so much immersion capability in LLMs that might be the path to artificial general intelligence, AGI. And if AI can generalize, and that basically means it's good at doing all different kinds of tasks, like all the tasks that a human would do. So I think it's very likely that that the data is not going to drive much in terms of AI application. It's going to be, how do you apply like foundational large language models or things like of that nature to the physical security industry, so that you can have that general intelligence perform tasks. And you mentioned the NVIDIA conference, and I watched the whole thing, and I think we can even see that today. Like, I think the low hanging fruit is that people are going to want. So right now, everyone's sitting on a gold mine in terms of the private data that they have, like that nobody else has access to. And maybe one way that you're going to sort of reveal the value of that is by developing co-pilots and assistants, which are like all the rage today, right? So like, I think those kinds of things, I don't really know, like you could have a co-pilot in your SOC or something like that, or you can have an assistant that's analyzing your data. And it all hinges around large language models. The interesting thing is moving forward to me is not really about data. It's going to be the accessibility of these large language models, because there's a massive disparity that's happening right now where you need billions of dollars to design the big data centers that you need to actually run these like large language models. So it's going to be who makes those services available and how do you access them within the physical security industry. Is it via API, like through somebody like OpenAPI, or do you take an open source one and try to build it? Like, you still need a shit ton of money to do that, though. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. But that's sort of my prediction. I don't think people are going to focus on specialized AI endeavors within the data that is like private to physical security. Like, and we can already see things like people using, if it's not an assistant or a co-pilot, like what's huge right now is the idea of retrieval augmented generation, which is basically like where you use an existing, chatbot or something like ChatGPT, and then you give it more context by designing a clever way to feed in the most relevant data in your private knowledge base, like whether that comes out of your access control system or from some reports that you generated or whatever. Like, you add context, and then you ask it questions, and then it tells you something interesting about the data that is underlying your business organization. So to me, that's like the more likely. Data is still going to be relevant. It's still going to be valuable. You will continue to drive value out of data, but I think the data, as far as it actually motivating new AI technology, for now is going to be bigger and better language models. That's what I see, which can be applied to physical security, but aren't intrinsically like derived from physical security.
As a side note, before we get to Adam, Jeff, have you heard about iJEPA or QStar?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So maybe those will be the new LLMs.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's for just context, because I know this isn't just a personal conversation. We have an audience, but iJEPA was something that's being developed by Meta's chief data scientist. And then QStar is a rumored thing that's being made by OpenAI. Basically, the difference is, if you're familiar with generative AI, it basically predicts the next token, aka the word, in a sentence, if you will. But what this is doing is they're incorporating thought algorithms before it makes the token prediction or the word prediction. So all that's doing is giving a better perspective, a more spatial perspective of the world, like humans do when they think. Because today it's not, there'll be some limitations, but that's for a different conversation. So anyways, that's awesome.
I have one, just an add on to that. Like, to me, that's not very compelling, because I've been watching a lot of stuff just to, like, actually just to predict the next token. You really have to predict the entire world before the token. So like my idea is that it's already very scary what it can do without this additional, with these additional capabilities. And they don't really have agency yet. Like, nobody's really even tried to attempted to design really agency, certainly not free agency. But my point is, just even with the next token prediction, it's very, very scary. Like, if you think about what they're already capable of doing. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. I would agree. Adam, you want to close this up? So the original question was, what's your perspective on the future of data and its relationship to artificial intelligence?
Well, I don't know if I can add much more onto it. Where I was thinking,
Jeff did kill it. He did kill it.
Yeah.
The big brother wins.
What I was just thinking is a little bit more specific than physical security. I think that we're going to start to see more of a focus on making sure that our physical security data sets are reliable. I think that people are going to quickly understand that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. But obviously, the more reliable that data is, the more beneficial it's going to be in regards to the application of it.
Cool. So it's that time. We're going to work to wrap up. So tell the audience something you guys are working on. Again, it could just be one of you or both of you that want to speak to this. Tell them something you're working on that you're excited about and where they can find you.
Yeah. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I mean, probably the most relevant and interesting thing is just recently we've started to do some exploratory work on conversational experience with being able to chat directly with your access control system. So basically what we just talked about, the application of sort of off-the-shelf foundational language models and how you can access your data, your access control data directly and get some insight about that data. So that's pretty interesting. That's pretty exciting. That's probably where the future of everything is going. But yeah, we're actually doing work on that. Like I said, it's exploratory, a lot of discovery, but yeah, it's cool. And as far as where people can find us, go ahead and tell them, Adam. I mean, we have Adam's probably the best way to find us.
A few different ways. Stratorsoft.com is our website. We're very active on LinkedIn as well. So you can find us at LinkedIn or just send an old-fashioned email at Stratorsoft.com. More than happy to help where we can relative to data and AI within physical security or
Hey, drop.